The range of delay reaches from 0 to 60,000 milliseconds, what is a whole minute. To enable finer adjustments, there are 3 regions. The first from 0 to 600 milliseconds, the second from 0 to 6,000 milliseconds, and the third from 0 to 60,000 milliseconds. You can adjust the value by using the slider or the wheel. The wheel is a nice thing to use as it acts like a real hardware wheel. You can hold the left mouse button and turn it. Or you can release the mouse button while turning the wheel and it will spin ahead for a while. You can stop the wheel by clicking the left mouse button again, or you can just let it spin off. Using the bigger scales, 0 to 6,000 milliseconds or 0 to 60,000 milliseconds, you sometimes better type the wanted or needed amount of delay in when you need to adjust the delay to a quite exact amount. When we talk about the delay functionality of CrusherX, we have to distinguish 4 situations. First, auto trigger of the buffer is active, with a running sequencer or a stream of live played sound is coming in. Second, auto trigger is off. CrusherX is running in manual mode and I trigger the buffer, in fact, manually. Third, the quantize function is active. And fourth, auto trigger is off, there is a sound file in the buffer, and the refreshing of the buffer's content isn't triggered at all, neither manually nor by the quantize function. Before we go and have a detailed look at these 4 situations, let me mention that there is a kind of basic delay, even with the delay offset adjusted to 0. With my computer configuration, it is quite exactly 100 milliseconds. It may well be different with yours, as it is influenced not only by the general latency caused by and depending on your computer, your sound card, your adjustments, but also on the way your DAW handles VSTs. So go and measure it. I have done this using a simple kick and an audio processor. Here it is Edison. Please don't forget that all vapor modulations, and delay is one of them, work together and influence each other so that the resulting sound is never dependent on a single parameter, like for example delay, only. But there isn't much use in talking about everything at once, and so today we will only talk about delay. All right. Let's talk about the 4 above-mentioned basic situations now. Composing delay structures precisely means calculating a little. Let's make sure we all realize the relation of BPM rate and milliseconds then. A BPM of, for example, 120 means 120 beats per minute, what is 60,000 milliseconds. If there are 4 beats a bar, common time, 1 minute is covered by 30 bars, or reciprocally 1 bar lasts 2 seconds, what is 2000 milliseconds. If I adjusted delay to 2000 minus 100 makes 1900 milliseconds, I should be completely synchronous with a delay of exactly 1 bar. Let's prove that using a single kick. Okay, it works. Let's play around with the drum loop. Would you like to travel back in time and change what's played back there in the past? Well, let's go and do it. And a last example with auto trigger on. Just a little bit of a modulation of the delay offset and even using only delay can bring some nice results. Let's switch to manual mode. The buffer is full of old sound played by the sequencer. Outside of CrusherX there is a sequencer. It is running, it is still running, but we cannot hear it. As we know from tutorial 4, we can use the delay function to scroll through the old sound in the buffer. Of course, we can also trigger the buffer manually and let some new sound in from the sequencer. Depending on the length of the grains and the amount of delay, there is more or less new sound let into CrusherX. Please watch tutorial 4, the buffer part 2, for details and figures. Question 2 and 4 in that video deal with the matter. Linking the manual button and the delay slider to a MIDI controller. There will be a tutorial about CrusherX's MIDI implementations later in this series. You can do a kind of, well, scratching. Well, after some exercising and the right sound material, you'll get quite interesting results. You can do more and more complex stuff like this, implementing some modulation, length and delay additionally to your manual triggering. More about modulation later in this series. But one fact we must make clear today: when you push the manual button, you don't hear the actual incoming sound at once. What you hear is still a part of the old sound in the buffer. You hear so much of this old sound as the delay and length adjustments determine before the newly intruding sound from your sequencer gets to your ears. In case you are keen on calculation or even need them, watch tutorial 4 and there, once again, questions 2, 4 and 6, or simply ask me. Let me show that with the two sounds you have been hearing in the background for the last seconds.